This is a portrait of Antinous, Hadrian's companion and lover, and perhaps, we don't really know for sure, but perhaps the really great love of his life. Antinous was a beautiful young Greek from Bithynia, a territory in what is now northwest Turkey. Hadrian passed through that area in AD 123 on one of his extended journeys, and that is where the two of them may have met. But there's very little detail we know about the relationship. Now, of course, Hadrian was married to Sabina, and that had been an arranged political marriage. It didn't really interfere so much. I mean, he had relationships with boys or just sex with boys. I mean, let's not make it too important. But that was something that was considered fairly normal. The only moment where we can really pick up the story is when the imperial party reaches Egypt in AD 130. We have a beautiful poem that is preserved. We have a papyrus scrap about Hadrian and Antinous hunting a lion together in the Libyan desert. Then later from Alexandria, they embarked on a journey up the Nile, and in October AD 130, Antinous drowned in mysterious circumstances. We have no idea what happened. Was it an accident? Certainly Hadrian in his autobiography claimed it was an accident, but rumors started straight away. It may have been suicide or ritual self-sacrifice. It may have been murder. We don't know. It has intrigued people from then on. What certainly happened is that Hadrian was deeply bereft. People tried to console him, and a cult developed. Here we have a wonderful statue of Antinous as Osiris from the Vatican. This was discovered in the early 18th century, and through the new excavations we know it was part of this cult shrine to Antinous in the villa. And you can see the appeal. You have his beautiful, soft, sensuous face in combination with this very strong, athletic, muscular body. The statue in the pharaonic headdress and the loincloth in the Egyptian manner, but then classicized and subtly eroticized as well. So you can really see where the appeal of these images came from. Perhaps, and this may not have been intended, that it was the ultimate sacrifice, that in death and through his death, Antinous helped to bind the Greek and the Roman world together. Maybe, in a sense, this is what he had wanted, even.
This should have been such a joyful time for Hadrian, the lover of architecture, religion, and history. But it wasn't. He was torn apart by grief. Despite all his offerings, despite being talked to by Memnon, the gods appeared to have abandoned him. Just days before, his young lover, his constant companion, Antinous, had died, drowned in the Nile. On hearing of his death, Hadrian, the hardened soldier, the ruler of the world, apparently broke down and cried like a woman. He was isolated in his huge entourage, trapped with a wife he hated. But he did act true to form. He founded a city, the only Roman city ever built in Egypt, and called it ἀντινοοուs. Then he went one step further. He had Antinous made into a god. This was contrary to even the Roman norm, which did allow for the deification of emperors and their immediate family members, but not a lover, and certainly not a male lover. Down the centuries, there have been many who believe that Antinous' death was no accident, though. Not murder, but self-sacrifice, possibly to give Hadrian new life, or just to save the reputation and dignity of his lover. Their relationship had clearly become the subject of much whispering and scandal. A later biography pulls no punches. As a result of Hadrian's devotion to luxury and lasciviousness, hostile rumours arose about his debauching of adult males and his burning passion for his notorious attendant, Antinous. And he went on to say, "We regard this association between persons of disparate age as suspicious."
This fragment is the face of a portrait, and it depicts an adolescent who was known as Antinous. What is preserved here is most of the face and a large part of the head. We're largely missing part of the nose, part of the jaw, part of the left side of the head. The portraits of Antinous are very recognizable for this very distinctive curly hairstyle. He has this very smooth, unlined face, these very rounded cheeks, these very deep-set eyes. Antinous is a character that we don't actually have a lot written about him, but what we do know about his background is that he was born in Bithynia. He, at some point in time in his youth, joined the entourage of the Emperor Hadrian, who reigned from 117 to 138. And Antinous, one of the most important things about him is that he was allegedly Hadrian's lover. During Antinous' travels with Hadrian, they were traveling in the province of Egypt, and they were on the Nile River, and Antinous drowned. He died in the year 130. He was about 20 years old at the time. And this is where Antinous' fame really begins. Hadrian decides to make Antinous a god, so he deifies him. He completely bypasses the Senate. Normally they would need to approve this. So he mandates religious rites for Antinous. And then Hadrian creates a city named Antinoopolis where Antinous died. Deifying someone, creating a cult around them, and also creating a city in their honor is certainly not something you do for just anyone. This cult spread very rapidly, and it spread very quickly throughout various parts of the empire. His image was everywhere. It was on lamps, on gems, on silverware, colossal large-scale sculptures for shrines and temples, smaller-scale busts and statuettes for private devotion. The Roman historian Cassius Dio actually said that you could find his images throughout the entire Roman Empire. When the portrait was purchased in 1898 by the museum's first president, Charles Hutchinson, it was in the form of a relief. It was on a marble panel, and it had a restored nose and a neck in plaster. In 1913, Art Institute curator Frank Tarbell published this piece. He questioned this form of it, suggested that it did not originally belong to relief, but that it actually belonged to a larger bust or statue. And so already in 1913 we have this question of the form that this portrait originally took. The most recent investigation that we've been on for roughly the last 10 years or so was spurred in large part by an observation by a colleague of ours, Egyptologist W. Raymond Johnson, who in 2005 while in Rome noticed at a museum there, the Palazzo Altamps, that they had a bust that had a modern face on it, and modern meaning perhaps 17th or 18th century. But the back of it, and then part of the chest, was ancient. And in looking at the join of this head, he questioned, does the Chicago portrait match with the back of the head and the remaining bust in Rome? Do these two pieces actually go together? In consulting with a number of other colleagues, initially there was a certain amount of skepticism. A key member of the team has been Jerry Padani, former senior conservator of antiquities at the J. Paul Getty Museum.
I must say, I was really skeptical that you would have this well-known portrait of Antinous in the collection in Rome at Palazzo Altamps, and then the fragment of the head that was missing in Chicago. Not impossible, just highly improbable. The more I looked at the photographs of the shape of the break on the ancient bust, and the more I looked at the fragment, the less likely it seemed that the fracture could mimic itself so accurately. So we paid a visit to Rome.
Jerry helped facilitate our work with our Italian colleagues in this process. He had suggested that we make a cast of the Art Institute's portrait of Antinous. Upon bringing the cast to Rome and seeing it side by side with the portrait, there was certainly a eureka moment.
As close as the break shape was, the biggest question was whether or not they actually belong, because there are so many portraits of Antinous that have survived, and they are so similar. Are we pursuing something that we want to believe rather than something that actually exists?
So in order to pursue this question further, digital scans were taken of both the Chicago cast and the Äntinous bust, after which the modern head on the Äntinous bust was digitally removed and the Chicago head was digitally attached. From this point, 3D prints were made, both of the cast of the Chicago piece and the Äntinous bust with the removed head. They were attached with modeling clay to move the head around to get the alignment correct. There was still very much a gap in the area specifically of the left side of the jaw. This might be not only due to the fragmentation of the sculpture when it broke, but also the fact that when the Äntinous piece was restored, the sculptor likely had to cut back a certain amount of material to attach the new restored piece.
You can't just do this digitally, you have to have in your hand a three-dimensional object to see if there really is a match. And that gap that exists between the fragment and the portrait bust has to be completed in a way where you're not forcing the completion of the shape. If a curl continued from the fragment to the head, then it was important that it flowed naturally. This team had to remain very objective. They did an extraordinary job, and it was clear that the fragment did in fact belong.
This whole process has involved so many different individuals and so many different forms of investigation. It's this wonderful blend of the new and the traditional that is continuing to allow us to really enhance the way we approach these questions and also to bring these objects to life in really new and exciting ways.
I think visitors should understand that antiquities collections aren't dead collections. There's new discoveries, new pieces of knowledge that are uncovered every day within the museum, just like at the archaeological site.
He stood, sucking his thumb, forearm resting on the shoulder of a friend, his free hand on his hip, half insolent, nonchalant and in control, his eyes shining from under luxuriant lashes, a smile of sorts upon those luscious lips. Greek marble personified, made flesh, Castor and Pollux paired, Dioscuri, children of Zeus and Leda, both ephebes, and one a living god. The raised and lowered flame, his friend the latter, and of a coarse, discoloured stone. But he himself, I half recoiled, I think I even staggered. Love at first sight? Yes, of course it was. Silence overwhelmed the noisy world. Incarnation and epiphany. The line of his jaw, his watching eyes, his mouth, the multiplex curves and concaves of his form, the mellifluous whole, chanting the open steppe, some fierce hard horseman ravishing the Bithynian genetrix generations before. Whence the line had mellowed, melded, ripened into this almost perfect, sun-warmed form. I asked his name, hardly remembering my own. "I am called Antinous," he said, his voice high and bright and still unbroken, broad chest thrust forward, kilt proudly swinging as he half turned toward me, as if dancing. The dowdy friend looked on and sniggered. A knowing youth, no doubt already familiar with the grubbier aspects of human interaction. Antinous frowned with displeasure, quite severe. The lad caught the look of disapprobation, calloused feet scuffing the dirt in embarrassment, looking from him to me, the snigger fading. My bodyguard rode up, breaking the spell with chinking metal and hoof-beats suddenly stilled. Both boys watched breathless, nothing now but boys, the armour and the horses and the weapons and the big tough men. Antinous' mouth half open, large and ripe. Already an aura flickered about his head with its shining, curling mass of heavy hair. Being busy, I forgot him. Or I thought I had forgotten him. But something led me back to the same district, doubtless the lure of the god, the elusive scent of the divine, which seems from childhood, calling from the past, enticing to the future, compulsive harbinger, trumpeting summons to fulfill the fated destiny. My forgetfulness had been itself a sign. So later, not too later, back I went with my sweaty, unwashed cavalry, my lumbering, unattractive troops, drawn by the radiance of divinity, the sweetness of infinity, back to my destiny. And there he was, upon the field of exercise, naked perfection, glistening with oil, chanting a Spartan war song. And his voice, the song within the song, the shining limbs, the flying hair, white teeth in the open mouth, the attitude, leant forward with his sword in hand, the imitation shield, a disc of painted wood, ready to repulse the coming foe, all the while chanting lustily the one and only, the pure, Ephebe, youthful Mars and Apollo in one shape. My heart, my lungs, my loins were in my throat. The tears ran down my face. My entourage was with me. I addressed him, amazed at my composure, put on like a diadem, every inch the emperor, apart from the telltale wetness of my cheeks, inwardly on my knees. I asked him where he had learnt that wonderful song. He smiled and bowed. My master taught it me. It lifts the spirit and inspires the flesh. This in perfect Greek. What other language should the Godhead speak? Come to me later. Teach me the words of the song, I commanded. He bowed again, quite unafraid. The courtiers spoke with him as I passed on, trembling very slightly and amazed at my own perturbation. What was this? What was this? What spoke to me through him? Which of the Olympians, Apollo in form and with Apollo's voice, entrancing the birds and trees, all the surrounding landscape and my soul, entrancing, changing, uplifting, until this place seemed heaven, and we both gods. I had known and half-loved many boys, and yet I felt, when I saw him again, as he taught me the words of that ancient hymn, he enchanted at my trick of memory. Perfect memory is only a trick. I felt, and I wrote it down in my private book. I fall, am made again, am made anew in depth and height, in being and in spirit. These valleys and these mountains dance, the stream rolls on, clouds condense to rain and scatter across the earth. I am cloud and stream, mountain and valley, earth and sky. I am all this and more, both him and me. And I felt, and I wrote this down too in my book. The beams of his eyes have shattered 2 worlds, nothing but ruins, nothing but ruins. The quiet pool of the mind is now stirred up, and the outward world is burning, all aflame. Myself am from myself, far, far away. The weak and feeble soul has left its cave and wanders in the ways of earth and air. People say my poetry's extreme, is precious, over-precious, lacking the Latin clarity. The Senate laughed at my provincial accent, and now they say I am too much the Greek. But this boy spoke as I did, understood the purpose and the striving of my song. At our second meeting, he was dressed befitting the guest of the emperor, and his eyes were shining. I wore my most beautiful jewels and precious raiment. Did I wish to dazzle him? I did. The priesthood over my forehead as I addressed my God, Pontifex Maximus welcoming his Lord. Also, like a father with his child, fond father to this beautiful, this modest Bithynian boy. He was not shy. He carried it off as an everyday event, yet with due reverence to our separate stations. I took him out into the gardens. We wandered there for many hours, beside the streams, among the bowers, and in an arbour, seated face to face, my arm along the back of his marble chair, my fingers playing with his luxuriant hair, he taught me his Spartan rhythms, Spartan rhymes. His low voice husky now, with speech still clear, the gentle breathing and the lion's roar of these transfigured verses in his mouth, washing each other's lips and teeth and tongues as I repeated after him that victorious song. The sun was going down behind the hills, the birds all singing, the small green frogs all choiring. The sunset glowed upon his glorious skin. His eyes were huge. I thanked him then, embraced him, and he smiled. The memory of that smile was with me still when I lay down that evening on my couch, my brain repeating the ancient verse, my inner eye rehearsing all I had seen. His figure strode beside me in my dream. his hand was in my hand. After our second meeting, I wrote this, thinking of his Spartan rhythms, the tenor of his voice, his eager eyes. What other lad so loved his poetry? Staring at me as he mouthed the words, watching each other's lips and teeth and tongues. I have chosen you. Nothing will now suffice, but that I own and hold you as my own, but that you take the gift which I extend, but that the gift by him to whom it is given is accepted in the spirit with which I gave, not as a sign of amity, nor in worship of your perfect natural parts, but as a symbol signifying that here, within your breast, within my breast, the withdrawn and recalcitrant world of the senses, for but one moment cleared of eddying mists, revealed itself, and as in a mirror seen, surveyed what yet it might become, and recognized the goal to which it moved. Not bad for a provincial, even if in Greek and not in Latin. I wrote this. I, the Emperor, wrote this to that young boy, to that Bithynian boy, Antinous.